In the year 1942, Grenada was blessed with the presence of nurse Monica CLYNE, who entered the nursing profession, stayed in that profession up to 1971, came to Brooklyn in the mid-70s, and also did some work, quite a number of years in this glorious profession of nursing. She was this month honored by the Grenada, Carriacou and Petite Martinique Nurses Association based in Brooklyn in New York, and quite a fitting tribute it was, and it's a great pleasure to have Nurse CLYNE on CultureShare.
Thank you.
Nurse, about the ceremony that was held in Brooklyn, you must have been quite happy because there was that eternal smile on your face as things proceeded.
It was one of the happiest days in my life. Yes, because I consider it an honor and a privilege to be alive and receive that thank you and acknowledgement from my students and my nursing colleagues. I'm very happy about it.
As you sat and witnessed the proceedings, what were going through your mind as the moments unfolded?
That I'm alive and well, and that they've thought of me after all these years to say thank you, and to see the nurses who have passed through my hand as students that have helped to become nurses, taken their places in the hospitals, and my work is going on even when I'm not there.
You entered the profession in 1942. In 1944, during the war, you went to England.
In a convoy.
You're right. The first in a batch of 7, the first set of nurses from the Caribbean to go to England.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the experience like then?
Well, we were in a convoy, but the excitement, we weren't even afraid because there was so much excitement traveling on that ship going, and you know, when we reached, it was winter, it was cold, but we were young and strong and we braved it. And we look forward to all the excitement to come. And we were very fortunate that we went to nice hospitals. I went to Fulham, and another of my colleagues was placed in Fulham with me, and another one went to St. Mary, Islington. So we kept in touch with each other, and we were very happy. And even those from the other islands, we all kept in touch, and we were well taken care of.
I mean, you sound so chronological. I have the feeling already that I'm reading a book on your life. Then you came back in 1951.
That's right.
To take up the prestigious position as the nurses superintendent.
Yes.
Another great feeling?
Yes. In fact, I was offered a post in England as nursing superintendent of Welling. And I was with the Queen's district nurse then, because I did public health training, and then I went on to do my district nurse training, which was very useful on my return home. I'm glad I took that course. And they offered me a contract. So I had to decide now whether to come back home, and then Grenada offered me that post, and I felt it was my duty to come home to improve nursing, because that was why I went in the first place. So I returned home and took up my position here.
You have seen a lot of people come and go in the nursing profession over the years.
Yes.
If one decides to become a nurse, what is the first basic requirement that is needed to pursue such a goal?
Love of people, kindness, a good disposition, and of course a good basic education. But not everybody could be a nurse. A nurse, I still maintain, a nurse is born and not made. She must have that basic kindness and love of her fellow man to do a good job, because it is given all the time. It's no taken, it's given, not getting.
But many a time we see that nurses are indeed born, when they get into the profession, seeing their courage broken by prevailing conditions, not so good prevailing conditions. Well, a situation that is common even today in the Caribbean.
That's right. We get our share of frustrations, but this is where the strength, the human strength, comes in. We have to overcome. And this is where unity comes in. That's why they have the association. When the nurses get together and as one talk together, they can achieve something. Better conditions, better working conditions. And of course, the nursing administrators too have to be open-minded and know when to stand up with the nurses for better conditions.
Nurses in Jamaica just had a strike action for more pay, better working conditions. In Trinidad, the doctors were supported by the nurses in also strike action for better working conditions, more pay because of the unavailability of drugs in the hospitals. Grenada has its share of nurses' action starting from the early 1970s.
That's right.
With all this turmoil in the Caribbean in the profession, do you think it's really hindering young people to come into the profession?
I don't think so. Young people will come in once a woman or a man has the desire to do nursing, he or she will find his place. I must say though that I have never been one to demonstrate in nursing. I may not like the conditions, but I was born with a mouth and a strong one too, and there's nothing I can't say around the table. I can negotiate much better with my mouth than with my feet standing in a picket line. I really don't like it. I've never been one for picketing and bargaining on the street. I'm much rather making my protest around a table and negotiating with the people, with the powers that be.
And even though you come down with a situation where decisions cannot be made that would be in your, as far as you're concerned, to be amiable decisions, what then? I mean, that is the sort of the idea I seem to get from the nurses, the reason why they're taking that kind of action.
Well, they need to band themselves together and to speak with a strong voice. That is true. But I still think meeting the politicians and meeting the powers that be around the table is really the best way. Negotiate.
AIDS, one of the common diseases around the world today. And even with all the education surrounding AIDS, cannot get it from saliva, cannot get it from human to human contact. I'm talking about, like, you know, not sexual but other human to human contact. But still, the more I read, you know, you get the feeling from people, there's that sense of apprehension. Do you think that with that sense of apprehension that people who also are deciding to get into the profession would be having second thoughts?
I don't think so, because one of the things that we learn in nursing is the technique of nursing. Where you learn sterile procedures, you have to learn to protect yourself. In the early days when I was in the hospital, then the Colony Hospital, there was the incidence of typhoid fever. I was one of the nurses that worked very hard and long hours in that isolation unit. I was always in isolation and I never got typhoid fever. I had to learn to take care of the patient and to protect myself. And this is one of the techniques in nursing, good nursing, to protect yourself. There are masks, there are gowns, there are gloves. Use them. You can't be afraid of the patient. We have to protect ourselves, but we also have to give loving care to the patients. And I will always advocate isolation technique, the technique of nursing the patient. The patient comes first.
And what would you say is the biggest satisfaction that a nurse can get from her work?
To see a patient get up and walk home. That is the satisfaction of nursing. To see that person who come in ill and sick and ill and frightened, and with your care and help, that man or that woman gets up and walks home and says, thank you.
I often hear the comment that nurses today are not as helpful and as caring as the nurses of yesteryear.
I think in all ages, nurses and nurses. There are good ones and there are indifferent ones. And today, as in any day, there are some excellent nurses. Those nurses I met on Friday, some of them are the finest nurses you could meet anywhere. And this is what has made me so happy and proud that I helped to produce them and to teach them. And they are very caring. Some of them they're in administration. Most of them are supervisors. They've gone on to have their bachelor's degree, they have their master's degree, and they're all senior nurses and helping other nurses. My niece is a nurse here, and she's in charge of her own department. And she was telling me that Bernice Joseph Mark, one of the nurses there, helped her to learn open heart surgery. There's one nurse helping another nurse. And this is where the work goes on. I think teaching, you help others, you teach them, and your work goes on. One is helping the other. And that is what I have advised them to do, help each other.
But then there was another problem, the problem of brain drain. Not much incentive in the Caribbean to keep the nurses in the Caribbean, and so we find that they go for greener pastures.
That's true. That's true.
What could be done to entice the nurses to stay?
That has been going on for years, and some stay. We had a problem, and with the nurses going away. And then I think I was the one who suggested to them, to the committee, because I was on the recruitment committee, to recruit older nurses, married nurses. At that time we didn't take married women who would stay. They have their families and they need jobs too, and they are responsible people. And we started taking in these married women, and it was very successful, because in the district service, the midwives, some of them were married and lived near their homes, and they had their families, and they didn't care to go away because they had their husbands and their children to take care of. And I think this is what we could aim at, placing the nurse in the situation which is beneficial to her.
But it is a chronic problem, okay? Mm-hmm. I've heard many a politician being very vocal about it, and the profession is indeed suffering because of that.
It's true, but we can't stop anybody from going away. We shouldn't try to stop. If a nurse wants to go away to improve her conditions, but we have to make the conditions favorable so that she would want to stay. But in the event of her wanting to go away, why stop her? Let her go. We must train people who would want to stay. And that's where I told you. I remember one of the first nurses, married women we took in, was a woman called Mrs. Finley. She was an intelligent woman, and she had a husband and children there. Now she worked as district nurse near to her home. She was very efficient, and her son now is the doctor at home. So you see, it worked. She didn't want to go because she had her husband and her children and her home to take care of, but she stayed on. And her children are now helping out in the medical field.
And how did you manage your family with your profession?
Oh, I did. I always had time for them. I was very energetic. I still am. I'm a little older, but I'm still energetic, and I'm still taking care of my grandchildren now. And I've always found time for my husband and for my children. I don't know how I did it, but I'd be going around the island inspecting medical stations and hospitals. I'd be in the hospital teaching, I'd be in the office working, and I still would be home and having meals with my children, taking them out, and taking them to the bookshop, taking them to fairs, anything that was going on. I was active. I made time for my family.
Okay, great. Look at this situation. A patient is at the hospital and a nurse has been assigned to this patient.
Yeah.
The nurse is going to see the patient for the first time. And the nurse is now walking towards that patient. How must that nurse apply her profession in that first meeting with that patient?
I know, in my situation, I give the one thing that could never be refused or rejected, a lovely smile.
That speaks
I've
1,000
never
words, right?
been mean with my smiles, and that will disarm any patient, take away his fear even before you say one word. That patient is going to feel comfortable. I remember here, I was called to a patient. She was a cancer patient, very ill. She was so scared when she heard the nurse was coming to take her home and to be with her. I was around the clock. And I walked in. And I looked at her and I stood at the foot of the bed and I just smiled. And I could have seen all the troubles of the world just roll off her shoulder, and she just looked at her father. She hugged him and she turned back to me. And and I said, I am Monica, and I've come to take you home and to take care of you. And I took care of her for 6 months. She died eventually, but I gave her the best care possible. And even when I was going home for, I think, a week or 2 holiday, she was so concerned, but they sent a good relief nurse. And when I came back, she was so happy to see me again. So it makes all the difference, to make the patient feel comfortable with you.
How much is that public relation aspect of nursing taught at the schools?
Well, it should be taught. It's an essential part of the program. It should be. It must be an essential part of the program. What nurse is there who could approach a patient and you haven't got the know-how, and the knack to make the patient happy and comfortable? Then you're no nurse. That's part of nursing. To make your people feel, not only patients, but people. I was at the office of a chief nursing officer. That was my designation. And I think I can boast there wasn't one nurse who was afraid to approach me. I made myself available and approachable at all times for the senior, from the matron down to the probationer. Anybody could have come, and I always said, if you have a problem, come to me. And I find time to sit down and talk to you, talk to the nurses. And not only the professional life, sometimes you need to look at their private lives too, because if a nurse has a problem at home, it sometimes affects her performance. And you may think she's a bad nurse and she's not. You better sit down and have a little talk. And maybe you can straighten out a lot of problems. Not only her problems, but her relationship with the patients. It goes a long way.
What was your most embarrassing situation in your career as a nurse? A difficult question?
I don't know. No, I don't think I had any. Yes.
A difficult question, right?
There was one. I was working in the operation room, and there was a specialist working a kidney operation, and he wanted a special instrument, a catheter, a glass catheter. There was one in the cupboard, and so the sister in charge of the theater, she told me, Miss Monroe, get it for me. I was the runner nurse, and so I went and I put the forceps very gently, and I took it up, I put it in the sterilizer, and I came with it for beam, and I was so happy. And as I put the forceps on it to take it to the doctor, I heard crack, and it went.
Oh, yeah?
Well, he could have, I think I looked as white as a sheet. I broke the only catheter. And there he was waiting with the instrument in his hand, waiting for me. And he said, he saw me and he saw the distress on my face. He said, it's all right, nurse. I'll make out. And I turned and I didn't know where to put my face. So sometimes there are embarrassing moments, but there weren't many.
But if you were given another life, would you be a nurse?
Of course I would. I think I enjoy that very much. I did very well in nursing, and halfway there I was asked whether I wanted to do medicine. I said no, I would do nursing. It paid off. I was very happy as a nurse. And in England I was fortunate to win the silver medal for my hospital, the first in 10 years. And I was very proud. And the matron and staff, they were very proud of me. But what made me happier still was when I found out that Dr. Deschmark, the surgeon, and Dr. Wolfson, the physician, had a bet that I would win that medal. I didn't know anything about it. So that made me very happy.
Nurse CLYNE, definitely, I mean, by all of the glorious moments you've spoken of, you know, tells us that you had a glorious career.
I did.
As a nurse.
I did.
And, you know, I think the tribute you had in New York was a fitting one.
Thank you.
Of a person who persevered tremendously for, you know, that number of years in Grenada, in England, and in New York.
Thank
a true
you.
Caribbean woman.
Thank you.
And I think a mentor for a lot of the young people coming up who want to get into the profession.
Thanks.
And who maybe not wanting to go into nursing, but just that spirit and that glow you have is enough to inspire many a people.
Thank you.
Nurse CLYNE, let me say thank you very much. It has been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you.
And may you have a prosperous life.
Thank you very much. Thank you.